A lot of the times people will come to us and they'll have some example sites and they're like, I want it to look just like that. And I really have to have the conversation of like, is that best for your audience? Is that really what your audience needs? I think a lot of people, look to other sites that are doing things and want to emulate that in a respectful and ethical way. But oftentimes you have to really look at your brand and be critical of does this make sense for me? And not just doing things because other big bloggers are doing it, because they're doing it because it serves their audience and your audience might be different.
Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of the Pretty Focused podcast, and we have Madison from Grace and Vine Studios today. Madison is a food blogger, but she is also a web designer for food bloggers, and she is going to share with us all of her knowledge and wisdom whenever it comes to designing food blogs. And, Madison, I just shared with you, we have a lot of photographers in our community who are starting food blogs right from the very beginning. And they have a lot of questions around design because they've got the photography down, right? They got the recipe writing down. And sometimes it's a lot of these little nuances that are confusing or overwhelming, I should say. And so we're just so glad that you're coming to talk to everybody about all of this today. So why don't you first, I'll stop talking and you tell us just about you and your food blogs and, when you started Grace and Vine Studios.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, I'm super excited to be here, and I'm well-versed with the Pretty Focused community just because I've worked with quite a few of the photographers in it, and obviously we've chatted multiple times. So, but yeah, like you said, my name is Madison Wetherill. I'm the founder and CEO of Grace and Vine Studios, and I also have two food blogs, Cook at Home Mom and Joyfully Mad. And it's been a really cool experience to have both of those things because I see food blogging from both sides. I see it from I understand what it's like to be a blogger and wear all the hats. And then I also see the technical side and the design side and why, user experience and personal branding is so important. So it's just an interesting thing to have kind of both of these perspectives. And I started both of them actually, or both businesses, the blogging side and the design side, in 2015. So this is my 10th year of doing this.
Congratulations. That's exciting.
Thank you. I started it very much as a hobby, just literally having some free time when my husband was still finishing up school and I was working a full-time job. And I'm like, what do I do with all this extra time? I'm only working 40 hours a week. But compared to my college days, that wasn't a lot. And so I had a lot of free time and I started just dipping my toes in, blogging, which back then was totally different than it is now. And just doing some Etsy design work for literally anything someone wanted me to design. I did a lot of wedding stationery and eventually started doing design work for my own blog. And then my friends in the blogging community started asking me to do the same for them. And that's how I got into literally blogging and doing food blog design. Because my friends were asking me how to do it. And I had taught myself how to navigate WordPress when I moved my blog from Blogger or Blogspot to WordPress. And yeah, I'd say the rest is history, but it's been definitely a windy journey from then to now.
I love that you started on Blogger. I have a blog I started in 2014 that's still on Blogger.
Does
it's
it get
still
traffic
sitting
to it?
there. That is crazy. So I love that's how sometimes just a lot of businesses start, where, you do it and you're teaching yourself and then you have other friends come in and say, teach me your ways, or just do it for me, better yet. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I think my experience in both worlds has been so different than it would have been without, the other side of things. And definitely has made me appreciate both sides of the coin, because it's a crazy journey that we all do as bloggers and business owners, and we do a lot. So
yeah, absolutely. So how many blogs have you designed at this point?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I want to say hundreds, but it's probably close to that. There was a time when I was doing 6 or 7 at a time, which was insane. We don't do quite that many now at a time because we're just a lot more focused in what we do. And, but yeah, we've definitely, I would say I've had my hands on hundreds of blogs at this point, whether that's in like little small projects or full redesigns or branding work, which is really interesting. And I have this conversation with business owners a lot about like niching down and things like that. And it's just really fascinating to work with only one type of business because you would think like I'd get bored or I would run out of new things to do. And it's actually quite the opposite. I think being in a specific niche, it's forced me to think outside the box because I want to create unique things for each client. But even more than that, it's just helped me to appreciate like how unique every food blog is. And I don't think most people like kind of on the outside of our world really see that to the same degree that we see it,
Yeah. I mean, working 6 to 7 at a time, what goes through my head first is that's 6 to 7 different brands, different voices, different styles, different personalities, different audiences. How do you as a designer like know how to speak to that? I mean, I feel like that takes a very skilled designer to be able to kind of separate those out and be like, this person gets this person gets this, and, help them shape their personal brand.
Yeah. Well, I think part of what has allowed me to do that is the way that we work with clients is very collaborative. And I always tell people like, your business, even if you can't articulate it, like, your audience, your blog, like your mission. And sometimes you just maybe don't know how to put all those pieces together. And so it's really my job to like come alongside the person I'm working with to help put all those pieces together. And a lot of the times it's just pulling it out of kind of like what they already know, or sometimes seeing the patterns. That's something that I think a designer has to do is like see patterns and see how things connect. Because just an interesting thing of like working with different clients, which I'm sure, the photographers listening have experienced this too, is people have different ways that they communicate. Some people are super visual. Some people are really well spoken or well written. And so our process involves multiple touch points to make sure that we get that voice across, because some people can like visually know what they're looking for, or they can look at something and say, no, that's not it. Other people can write it out and you have to kind of be able to translate that. But to kind of go back to like your original question, I think it's that collaborative effort of understanding the blogger as a person, understanding their audience, understanding kind of what the industry like best practices are. And then you're like melding all of that together. But yes, to your point, like too, I don't want every single one of our client sites to look exactly the same. So it's this just puzzle really of figuring out like who gets which feature or what makes the most sense for that audience, and being able to like troubleshoot that, because a lot of the times people will come to us and they'll have some example sites and they're like, I want it to look just like that. And I really have to have the conversation of like, is that best for your audience? Is that really what your audience needs? And a perfect example of this is there was like a fad for a while, maybe like 5 years ago. Everyone wanted the like little diet icons on their site where it was like dairy-free, gluten-free, whatever.
Oh, sure.
And I had clients who would come to me and ask me for that. And I would ask them, well, do you have that content? Like, is your content split up in that way? And they'd say, no, not really. And I'm like, well, then you don't need those icons. It doesn't make sense for your brand to have that. And so just as like a little other nugget, I think a lot of people, look to other sites that are doing things and want to emulate that in a respectful and ethical way. But oftentimes you have to really like look at your brand and be critical of like, does this make sense for me? And not just doing things because other big bloggers are doing it, because they're doing it because it serves their audience and your audience might be different.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's something I have learned is like, I see other businesses doing things and I'm like, well, let me try that. Well, let me try that. And it's like, I always have to go back to what I know has worked well for me. Like I have started to think more critically about those things and like, does that actually line up? It takes a skill. It takes a lot of honestly hard learnings to realize that. A lot of failed experiments. I have had a lot of those. But I love that you are probably, what was going through my mind is like, you're probably a really good question asker. At this point, you know how to ask all of the questions to pull out that information that you need, because it can be really hard to articulate those things of your brand and what you need. And so I love that you are able to just pull that out of people. Because right now, I mean, I think for a while we had, correct me if I'm wrong, when we started back in the day, because everything was a diary, brands were a little bit, or blogs were a little bit more personal. And then they kind of shifted to, I don't know how you would describe it, maybe a corporate brand where there wasn't necessarily a face behind it. And now we're kind of shifting back to, in light of, I think, of recent Google updates, this more of a personal brand. Is that kind of correct? Have you seen that kind of ebbs and flows to blogs and brands?
Yeah, it's definitely like we went really, I say we collectively as like a blogging community, we went from it being like overly personal almost, which was ironic because back then we didn't have social media in the same way we have now. But even so, it was still just like you said, a diary. Like literally when I started my blog, it was like what my husband and I were doing in our newlywed life. Like it was super like behind the curtain kind of thing. And then people got annoyed with that, people being the readers. And so we went super hard the other way where we're like, all right, I'm never going to tell you anything about where this recipe came from or why I love it or anything like that. And we're just going to stick to like, this is what, this is what Google wants. And so that's what we're going to present. And then that wasn't really clicking either. And then kind of we had to go swing to maybe find a moderate in between those two where we're providing helpful content. We're providing SEO like driven content, but with a personal lens, because I think and I was just having a conversation with someone last week about this, but as blogging has become more almost like commoditized, if that's the right word, but it's become more like available to us. Information has become more available. We no longer just want the information. We do want a little bit of the story. And what we really are looking for is like, is this relevant to me? Because, I can go in and I can type something into Google or ChatGPT or Pinterest, and I can find like really a generic answer. And what I'm trying to find is like a specific answer that fits me in my unique situation. So it's not just like, I need a recipe for a Wednesday night. It's like, I need a recipe that is maybe dairy and gluten-free for my kids who only have 30 minutes to eat dinner before they go to soccer practice. And also I don't want them to be like hungry after soccer practice. So it needs to be like high protein and filling and, all those things. Right. And, you used to be able to like type something like that crazy like string into Google and it would give you nothing. But now with all these new tools that we have and all these new ways of finding information, like we can actually find recipes that are that specific to what we need. And I think what's going to happen and where the shift is going to come is people are not going to necessarily go to the search engines as much for those results. They're going to go to the people that they trust. And so while we're kind of swinging back to this like personal brand side of blogging, I think bloggers have an opportunity to like capitalize on that and to use that personal brand to make that connection so that people come to you because they trust you and your recipes, even if, things aren't as specific as maybe they need, but they know you're going to have the solution for them. So yes, we 100% have like done this crazy, like tumbling between these two extremes. But I think if bloggers are willing to pay attention to that and like, I say take advantage, but in a good way, to capitalize on that, I think they're going to see success in being able to kind of meld these two worlds of what people are looking for.
Yeah. Now we have a lot of questions, from our community of really like a lot of the technical side of things, like what platform should you use and all of this. But I think before you kind of get into that technical aspect, you kind of have to take a step back first and say like, what actually is a personal brand? Like what elements are actually needed? Are there like physical design elements? It is like, how do you build that brand? So like, let's not even talk about the web design aspect, right? Because there's so much more about building that brand than just design. Like that helps, right? That kind of brings it to life. But when you help people kind of establish this and bring it all together, what would you say makes a personal brand?
Yeah, and I love you said like that the web design part is secondary to this, because I have seen so many people make the mistake of like, I'm just going to create like a beautiful looking website, or I'm just going to use a template for now because that's good enough. And then what ends up happening is you have these like polar opposite, vibes happening. You've got this like really stark kind of minimalist website situation. And then your personal brand on Instagram is like fiery and fun and, all of these different things. And it's like, these two things do not go together.
Yeah.
But really like your personal brand, it is the thing and the things that make your blog and you as a creator unique. And for so long, people have been so afraid to like stand out because they didn't want the attention, or they didn't want to have the criticism that comes with that.
Yeah.
And so what tends to happen is people, don't want to stand out. And so they just blend in and they kind of get forgotten. But the personal brand, it's, it's the way that you communicate with your audience. It's the type of content you share with your audience. Are you going to share gluten-free recipes, or is that like not your jam? And that's just, people aren't going to come to you for that type of thing. Even if it's not diet specific, if it's just like I share, healthy dinners, well, how do you define healthy? Like that alone is going to differentiate you from other people in that same space. I said it's kind of the way that you communicate. That could be like, are you a family-friendly brand, or do you have like cuss words in your content or in your Instagram stories and things like that? We don't often think about like defining those things because they're maybe just like a part of like who you are as a person. But it's those things that differentiate you, the accent that you have, or even the way you show up on Instagram stories. Like, I think a lot of people don't really realize that their Instagram is like the definition of their personal brand. Like the way that you show up in that space, what feels comfortable to you, that typically ends up being your personal brand. And then typically that's not maybe bleeding into all the other areas of your business. And so then it feels like you have these like disconnected, parts of your business. And that's most commonly what I see. And I say Instagram because it's the thing that, most people are using, but that could be any platform that you're really showing up authentically. Maybe it's your email list and like the way you write to your people, but wherever it is that you feel the most comfortable, that's probably the place that your personal brand is most authentically showing up. And it's like, that's where you need to pay attention so that you can take elements of that and put it into the rest of the parts of your overall brand. Because your personal brand is really just one part of that overall brand that people know you by.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Love that you're like, how you show up on Instagram really defines that, because that's like your personal connection. You're talking to them on stories, and then you have your website. The two should obviously, work together, but that's really where you're going to make those connections with people and stuff. And so, Instagram isn't the biggest traffic driver, but it's one of the biggest relationship builders. And so that is going to obviously how you stand out. I love that you're like, if you're just like everybody else, you're going to be forgotten, right? So how can you stand out and just show up in those ways? So I love that.
Well, and something that I think often happens is they're gravitating towards a platform like Instagram or TikTok, or even YouTube has a lot more of that like community and like back and forth conversations. We know as podcasters, like podcasting is not one of those things necessarily.
Yeah. Right.
But what often happens is then they're like looking at maybe their email list, or they're looking at their website, and they're like, well, no one ever comments on my stuff. So like my audience just isn't engaged there. But I think we have to ask ourselves the question, like, are you showing up in those other platforms in the same way that you show up on Instagram? And yes, you don't have the same, like the platforms themselves are different, but it's more than just that they're different. It's that you show up differently on different platforms. Your website doesn't reflect the personality that you have on Instagram. And so when someone comes there, there's not as much for them to like attach themselves to. It just feels generic. It feels like everybody else's. And so they don't interact with it because they have nothing to say, right? Like you show up on Instagram, you say something that makes people like light up for whatever reason, they're going to respond, whether it's that you're like making a funny reel and entertaining them. And so they think it's, funny, and they're going to comment that. But then on your website, it's just like, did you make this recipe? Please comment. Like, okay, I don't know what to do with
Sounds
that.
like a robot.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly like that major shift that we had within content of people like writing for SEO. We became robotic. We removed all of the human out of that content. And then, as bloggers, we get frustrated that people aren't interacting with us. Well, it's because you're acting like a robot and people don't know what to say to interact with a robot.
Yeah. Now, this might be related or might not be, but you can tell me. A lot of bloggers, like in our community, and I'm like, are you doing video? And they're like, no, I don't do video. And I'm like, to me, I'm like, oh my goodness, you are leaving so much opportunity on the table. So videos on blogs, on websites, like we know videos, yes, on social media, but what are your thoughts with the videos on the blogs?
I would say it's the exact same thing as what I was just saying. We know that video is dominating those other platforms. And then for whatever reason, and I am 100% in this camp, so I'm speaking to the choir here, preaching to the choir, but we don't have videos on our blogs. We don't have, we're not putting the effort into the videos on our content. And then again, we wonder why people feel disconnected from us. And so, every single conversation that I'm having these days has some element of video, like where people are talking about video is the way that blogging is going to go. And I think there's so many reasons for that, but I would say the two core reasons that come to mind is, one, as more things become able to be generated by AI, video for now is still one of those things that is not being generated by AI in mass production. There are AI videos out there, but like I can't, upload a picture of my face and have it make a recipe video for me yet. When that comes, I'm going to be really happy though. But for now, like that doesn't happen and it doesn't feel real. Like people can still tell it's not quite real. And so that's the primary way. And I'm trying to remember what my second thing was that I was going to say. I think video is, it's something that captures us in a way that words and photos don't anymore, because we see words and photos all over the place. I think it's just one of those things that over time, that's how technology has changed. I was at a conference back in the spring and I remember them saying how a lot of kids now, like they would rather watch a 6-minute video to learn to do something than to read a paragraph on how to do it. And so that's just kind of how technology is moving us as a society. And I think that is an untapped potential to be able to make that connection with people, because, we're sitting here on video. You can see how I'm moving my hands. You can see how my mannerisms are like, and you've met me in real life. So, like how I am in real life too. People want that experience with the people that they follow online too. And the more people that we follow online, the more we want to know those like little idiosyncrasies about people, because that's what makes us feel human. We want to see the mess in the closet or the mess on the counter while you're doing a recipe video. Like we want to see those human aspects of life. Even though as the creator, like I don't want you to see those things, but the second you do, the second you realize like I'm relatable, I get what it's like to have the dishes, piling up in the kitchen while I'm creating dinner and stuff like that. So I 100% think having video on your site, on your website as a way to connect with people is a huge way to make that personal brand connection with people so that they get you. And also I think it's really one of those ways that we're going to hopefully overcome some of these crazy algorithm changes that we've been going through the last couple of years. It's one of those things. And I said this the other day to someone, but really like your personal brand and any way that you can share that with people is the way that you are going to stabilize your business and your brand going forward, because it's the one thing we can control. We can't control those algorithm changes. We can't control the platforms doing whatever they're going to do, but we can control the way that we show up and the way that we make those connections with people, even if it looks different on different platforms, or, we've got to change like the method of how we do that. But at the end of the day, it's just human to human connection.
Yeah. So would you say like hands in pan style videos work? Like how to make the recipe, or because I'm sure some people are freaking out right now. I need to be on camera. I don't want to be on camera, but I can put my hands in in the pan and I can do all that stuff. Do you think that it matters? Is it like you're embedding the Instagram or the TikTok reel inside the blog post? I mean, I see that I see that quite a bit where they're kind of connecting the blog to the Instagram, and you're like connecting all of these channels, even like an Instagram feed, to make sure like, hey, you can check me out here too. And I think maybe it's like a more well-rounded way to repurpose all of that content and let people know, hey, I'm like, here I am. Like you have a content library, right?
Yeah.
Make sure people have access to everything, right? And you're easy to find. So back to my original question, hands and pans video, or like, do I need to be like this?
I think both can work. I still see, on YouTube videos that are like a hands and pans type of video that have 25,000 views on them. I think what is more engaging for people these days is more of, it doesn't even have to be your face, but it's like just more, if that makes sense. The hands and pans is such a, like, I imagine it like a cropped in view of something, it's like, you're not really getting the view of like, what does her kitchen look like? Or, how does she maybe put this on the stove and like go back and forth in the kitchen and like things like that. So I think non-hands and pans, like I almost want to call them like static videos. Obviously there's movement, but they just feel a little bit more static to me. There's value in those if it's something like I just want people to see how to make the recipe. But from a personal branding perspective, I do think people seeing your face is more effective in making that connection. Doesn't mean you can't have success without that. I know food bloggers who are like very successful with video on Instagram and they never show their face, and it's the same exact like setup every time. But I think regardless of which version you pick, like doing video is better than doing no video. And if the hands and pans is what you can handle and what you can do, like go for it. But again, like I was saying earlier, like people want that human connection and they want to see that you're like a real person. And so even if you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't want to show up on Instagram, or I don't want to do whatever, like people feel that too. And you showing up and being vulnerable in that way invites other people to be vulnerable back. And so I think it's an important thing for us to like work through as creators. Like, how can I show up in a way that still feels authentic and feels comfortable to me, but also allows me to be real with my people? Because, when we're just trying to make these connections, but we're never willing to show up in a vulnerable way, it's like people aren't going to reciprocate that.
Yeah, I know. And I know we have a lot of photographers who actually do those hands and pan style video. And so I would say in that case, like, don't be concerned because, like, oh my gosh, is that going away? No, I think that adds value, because I think what it gives a blogger an opportunity is like, yeah, you can maybe hire that out. And, the blogger does a voiceover for it. I know, a pair that does that, a blogger will do like the voiceover for the video that she has created. But then also that blogger is showing up on stories. She shows up in other ways. So it's like the videos on Instagram might be overhead, but she's kind of showing up in the stories. I think that's like another element to how you can do that. But let's kind of get into some of the technical aspect now, because we talked about, building a brand and how important it is to show up. Let's talk about like building that blog, and what platform do you recommend?
Well, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I will tell you there is one platform that I have never had to migrate someone away from, and that's WordPress. Yeah. On the other side, I have migrated people from Squarespace to Wix, WordPress.com, not self-hosted WordPress. That we can talk about that if you want. But I think those are the three. A Blogger we talked about. Don't have too many people moving from there anymore. But back in the day, that was
you might have one more that you're going to have to migrate.
I got you when you're ready. But yeah, WordPress, self-hosted WordPress specifically, which means that you are paying for a hosting company like Big Scoots. That's the only one I'm going to name drop because it's the one I recommend the most. But someone to essentially, I like to equate it to like a storage locker. I am paying Big Scoots in this case to hold the files that my website runs off of. That's what self-hosted means. It means that you are providing that, but you are using the platform of WordPress for like the the structure of your blog.
Okay.
And, I've had so many food bloggers who start on Wix or they start on Squarespace because they want it to be easy and they want something that, maybe doesn't take as much fuss as WordPress, has a reputation. I will say it doesn't take as much fuss as you think it does, but, and every single time they get to a place where their business is growing and those platforms have limitations. And sometimes that's an ad limitation. Like I can't put ads on my site correctly, so I can't monetize correctly. A lot of the times it's more technical stuff. Like I can't have a recipe card plugin. So my readers can't print my recipes and they're complaining about that. It's a huge problem. Even not even being able to scale a recipe or add in things like affiliate links within the recipe card. There's just so many limitations to those other platforms. So I always like to tell people, like, save yourself the hassle of having to switch later and just start on self-hosted WordPress and treat it like a business. Even if you, like, my husband has many hobbies that are not monetized hobbies, and he spends money on those hobbies to help him, do better at them. We can do the same thing, even if we're not monetized yet or we're not making money in some way on our blog. You can still invest in that hobby, hoping that it grows to something more someday. And hosting really doesn't cost that much money either. So it's
right. Well, I mean, it's still a write-off, right? You're still working to build a business. I mean, talk to your CPA, but I mean, that's you're building a business, right? And so you can absolutely still, write some of those things off. So not WordPress.com. It's like WordPress.net. Org. Not net. Don't listen to me. WordPress.org. So that's where you need to go.
You don't actually go to, it's very confusing, but you don't go to WordPress.org to like buy the hosting. You go to a hosting company and then they install WordPress on the server for you to then build your website, which sounds really complicated, but the good hosting companies take care of this kind of stuff for you. Just don't go to WordPress.com and buy a hosting package there because it's not the same thing.
Not the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to go to Big Scoots. Step number 1, go to Big Scoots. That's where you buy the domain.
You can, right? Or you can buy it from another company if you want. Some people like to keep their hosting and like who owns their domain separate for whatever reason. Okay. The only reason is like, let's say you're with a bad hosting company, not Big Scoot's a different one, and you want to move, then you also have to transfer your domain, which is just an extra hassle. So if you have the domain purchased through a site, I like to use Namecheap is the company I use for domains. And then I can just, no matter what hosting platform I'm using, or even if I just want to like hold a domain but not actually use it, they all can kind of like live under that one umbrella. Okay. But then then you basically connect that with your hosting company. They can set up all the tech stuff for you, and then you can go from there. Okay.
So buy the domain first, then, and then go to Big Scoots.
Yes.
And then go to, they will install everything. And so then you're like logging into your Big Scoots account to manage and build everything. Is that correct?
Or typically they'll create a username for you, and then you can go to like the WordPress dashboard that's on your domain name. And then you can, you'll see a normal WordPress dashboard. You can install your theme, your plugins, all of that type of stuff, which just as like a little nugget with plugins, just be conservative in what you add. You don't need everything. Don't add things just because they look shiny. I've got some blog posts and things like that go over like, kind of my must-have plugins for food bloggers, but typically you're not going to need very many of them when you're getting started. And if you're finding that you are adding plugins as band-aids, like, oh, I need to add something, and my theme doesn't do it, so I'm going to add this plugin, then first of all, ask yourself if you really need that thing, because you might not. But second of all, if you start to add a bunch of band-aids in the form of plugins to, quote unquote, fix your theme, then it's potentially that your theme is not a great one, and you might consider changing themes instead of adding a bunch of band-aid plugins.
Yeah, I think before we hit record, you were talking about how having good habits from the very beginning and setting up good routines right from the start makes it so much easier than just band-aid solution all along the way. And then 5 years in and you want to, pull your hair out. And so what are some of those things that you would suggest doing right from the very beginning that so you don't have to pull your hair out in 5 years?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the first we already mentioned is start on the right platform. Just self-hosted WordPress. Don't think about it. Just do it. The second is a good theme. And, when we build our websites for clients, we use the Cadence framework. That has become a lot more of a popular one, and you can definitely purchase that and set it up yourself. There's also companies that sell, pre-made Cadence-based themes. Cadence, I find, is just very flexible for people. It has a lot of design options built into it so that you don't have to know code to be able to add a border to a section or something like that, which seems basic, but it's not that easy to do if you don't know code on a lot of other,
seriously,
platforms. Yeah. So I love the Cadence framework for that. A lot of food bloggers also start using the Feast themes, which are also a great starter theme. They just are limited in their customization options, which is why a lot of people will opt for, a semi-custom theme or a custom theme down the road. But when you're just getting started, something like a pre-made theme is perfect. I actually talk people out of custom sites a lot of the time when they are just getting started, because you don't know what you're going to need yet. And so building something from scratch doesn't really help you if you don't know what you need. So unless I have someone who has a very clear direction of this is my second blog and I know exactly what I need or something like that, I will usually convince them to start small and grow from there.
Okay.
Questions on themes before I jump into?
Yes. Yeah, we have one. She said, when I started a blog, I wanted the site to be beautifully designed. Respect. Love that, of course. But after a lot of research, it seemed that the consensus was to start with a minimal design and focus on the content, like you just kind of shared, because many times the more aesthetic blogs have technical issues.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Okay.
Yeah, I would say if you focus solely on design and you don't focus on functionality, then sometimes that can happen. And a lot of the times when your site's small, it doesn't really matter as much. But as your site grows, as you're getting organic traffic, as you're having visitors come, those little things add up along the way. And you end up having a site that isn't hardly usable, but it looks beautiful, but I can't click a button on it because it won't load and things like that. And so I definitely recommend, while you're building, before you have, 25, 50 blog posts, just focus on that. And then once you have that, you're going to have a lot more awareness of what you need in terms of functionality or in terms of, even how things are organized, because, we could have a whole entire podcast about how content needs to be organized. But it's not just random. It is very a thoughtful process that you should be considering. And so, but if you don't have any content, you don't know how to create an organization for no content. So
that is true.
Yeah. So I definitely recommend just the short and sweet, start minimal, start with something that is a pre-made, basic theme. And yes, you're going to get frustrated that it's limited, but that's okay because your focus is on the content, and then you can learn, and grow into what you need it to be down the road.
Yeah. So she said she reluctantly got on the Feast starter. Is that what you were just sharing? So you would you say Cadence? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Cadence better than Feast.
I do mostly for the optimization, or not the optimizations, the customization options, because something that I have just found over the years is food bloggers are creative. They want to be able to create new, blocks for something, or they want to be able to change their homepage and add a splash of color. And Cadence just makes that really easy to do out of the box without having to sacrifice, optimizations and site speed and things like that. And Feast has changed over the years to offer more things like that, but their kind of basic theme is very basic and minimal because they want you to focus on the content and they don't want you to get distracted by lots of shiny objects and things that you can change.
Right. Okay. So your recommendation for her is just build your content. At what point should she upgrade or change over from Feast to Cadence so she has a little bit more flexibility with that?
I would say again, that 25 post mark is a really good place where you've tested the waters, that you're going to stick to this and commit to it. And that maybe is an opportunity to then invest in maybe a $300 theme instead of like, I don't know what Feast is right now, but maybe like a free theme or something like Feast. And then, when you get to the place where you're monetized in some way, where maybe it's ad revenue that you have, maybe you're working with clients directly for like photography or things like that, and you're making some consistent money, then maybe it's time to consider investing in like a semi-custom theme, because you have found the limitations of what you're using right now. You see those gaps in what you're not able to do. And that's a good time to be like, okay, now it's time to invest in this. And there are definitely, I've worked with people who are brand new, but they maybe had like another business before or like another blog. And so there's just a difference in, kind of the direction and knowing what they want, versus again, investing multiple 4 figures and then having to redo it all because it wasn't what you needed because you didn't know what you needed.
Yeah. I love that. Start small. And then whenever you know what you need, you can make that switch. And whenever you monetize, whenever you're monetized or you're bringing in some income, you make that switch. Because it sounds like it's not a hard switch to make. It
depends. It depends on your own technical ability. It's definitely not as hard as something like switching from Squarespace to WordPress, which can be just very manual, like a lot of copying and pasting and like physically moving things around. A theme switch can be pretty easy, depending on how many Band-Aids you have on your site and how many like maybe page builders you've used. That's one thing I will recommend. Do not use page builders like Elementor when you're building a food blog. It's just a recipe for disaster. It does not transfer over. The second you uninstall that plugin, stuff goes away, and that's another nightmare that you don't want to have to deal with. So stick to the native WordPress block system as much as you can, except for like your theme, your homepage, that type of stuff. And, but definitely for your content itself, stick to WordPress.
Okay. So what about like the photos and optimizing photos for blogs?
Yeah.
Alt tags, those types of descriptions, how is this a Band-Aid approach? Like, can you Band-Aid that, or, start good habits from the very beginning? I have a blog post that I can, I can't remember if it's a blog post or a podcast episode, but I can send it to you to include in the show notes. But kind of like quick rules for image optimization. The first thing is always make sure that you're naming your images before you upload them. So we don't want our images to be image 1, 2, 3, 4. We want them to be named, chicken dash casserole, whatever. That's great. It's good for SEO, but it's also just great for like organization of your media library in WordPress, because if your images aren't named, you will never find them again. Seriously, it's a pet peeve of mine. Stop it.
Ask me how
Stop. It's not hard. It is right there.
Yes. Especially if you're using something like Lightroom, you literally can just change how it's exporting, and it's great. The current recommendation as of right now, which could change at any point, is that Google wants images that are 1200 pixels wide. So when you export your images, just change the width to be 1200. So vertical images are usually 1200 by 1800 for me. Or if they're horizontal, it's 1200 by 800. That's just a good habit to be in. If you make them...
You told me you export vertical and horizontal. So you do all your vertical one way and then all of your horizontal together.
Yes.
So that way.
So I do 2 separate exports out of Lightroom, all my horizontal together, so I can set them at that specific size. And then the vertical I do as a separate export too. The only reason that gets a little bit hairy is that my numbering is slightly off, because I'm doing like 1 through 10 is vertical and then like 11 through 14 is horizontal, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And you can reorder
it horizontal, like do like an H or something in their image name. But yes, you can reorder it. You can change it later. But yeah, having images that are resized from Lightroom is going to greatly help you when you get into WordPress and you upload them, because otherwise you can end up with images that are gigantic. Image sizes, when they come out of your camera, it's like 3000 pixels. Well, your phone is like 400 pixels wide. So obviously that's a huge image that doesn't need to be that big. And so even just starting at the 1200 mark, you're going to end up with images that are sized properly for your theme, for your loading on desktop and on mobile. and you won't have your WordPress trying to work too hard.
Yeah.
There's also image optimization plugins that you can use, but I will say tread lightly with these because there are some that are better than others. And if you use one that compresses your images too much, you can end up with pixelated and grainy images. But I will say usually that is because people are looking on their desktop, not on their phone. So if it looks fine on your phone, 80 to 90% of your audience is seeing it that way. And this is one of those things as creators, like we create these beautiful, stunning images, but we have to remember people are seeing them really, really small, and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can export vertical and horizontal. I would say, because if we have photographers listening to this, they're like, what? I would do two. I would do high res, and then I would do like the smaller dimensions, whatever the blogger needs. So you're saying most Google's wanting, the 1200 wide. So you do exporting differently for landscape and portrait or vertical. And so also talk to your blogger and see if that's a need. Cause I do think that there could be some who have different needs really depending on is it dependent on the theme?
It can be. I will say good themes, it won't matter. Back in the day, there used to be like, you would have to size the image specifically for whatever the theme used.
Yeah.
Images just work a little bit differently now. There's thumbnails that get created and things like that to where it's okay if it's bigger than the content area is essentially what we're talking about. So most of the time it's not a big deal, but yes, I would say talk to your bloggers. And if you're exporting a high res and a like web size, then you should be fine, because even if the web size isn't exactly what they need, they can use the high res version. But I will say, as a client of photographers, when my images are exported at 1200 pixels, I'm like, I want to hug you because you just saved me time and I loved it.
Yeah, seriously. Oh, that's great. So talk to your blogger, make sure you're giving them what they need because they will love you for it. 100%. I love that. So alt
text. Yes. I didn't get into that.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Random rabbit trail. I'm sorry to do that.
No, I mean, that was all good. It was all image optimization. So alt text is one of those really bad habits that food bloggers had for a very long time. We misunderstood what alt text was. Alt text is meant to be a written version of what the photo shows. And it's specifically for people who use screen readers or who are visually impaired. And so when your alt text says like, basically your meta description of like, this is my descriptive, like why you should come to my blog, that's not what that's supposed to be. It is supposed to, if you were to close your eyes and someone read the alt text out loud, I can visualize what the picture is. So when you think of it that way, it's not going to be like flowery, descriptive, like, this is mouthwatering and delicious. It's going to be yellow napkin and a lemon cupcake with a lemon slice on top. Like that's what it's going to read. Okay. So we want it to be that version of alt text, not the like Pinterest description, what I would share on an Instagram reel type of thing. There is an amazing plugin that I really love that uses AI for this now. And I think it's literally called alttext.ai. There's flash sales for it often. I should probably be an affiliate for them, but I'm not at this moment. But it is life-changing because I don't have to write alt text anymore, but I just read them and make sure that they are, describing it the way that it should be. And but that's a really good habit to get in. When you upload your images to WordPress, to your media library, add your alt text right away, because if you don't add it right in that moment and you like add a image to your post without that alt text, it's just a pain in the butt to go and actually add that alt text to that image once it's in your blog post, versus if it lives in your library, every time you add it to anywhere, the alt text comes with it.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That's good to know about alt text, is that it is a bowl of spaghetti with meatballs, white bowl of spaghetti and meatballs on a marble
with parsley garnish. Like it should be that descriptive. And I mean, photographers out there, if you want to like really wow your clients, include that alt text in a document for them and man, that would be a great little added bonus.
Whoa, that's really cool. I mean, like that feels like a great AI. It's like,
yes, it's an amazing AI.
It's so literal. I'm like, that sounds like it's a great job for AI.
Yes, it totally is. I mean, you can upload it to Claude or ChatGPT and ask them to write it for you. Just double check it with, human eyes. But yeah, that is one of those things that it's a really big pain to go back and fix it over time. So do it right, from the beginning, or start now. Like, even if you haven't been doing it that way, like start now. The next time you upload images, do it that way. And at least you'll be going forward. You'll be, kind of following that best practice.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So just to kind of recap, Band-Aids, things to avoid. Don't add Band-Aids to these things. Fix them from the very beginning is making sure that you are on WordPress. You've got great hosting like Big Scoots.
Yep.
You are optimizing your photos, right, the right way. You're renaming the photos like the name of the recipe.
Yes.
And then you're adding in those alt texts in the library, not just it within the blog post. I love that. That's such a great little tip that I don't know if like a newbie, I don't know if I would have known that.
I didn't know for years. I didn't know that. And so, yeah, it's definitely one of those things. Just get in that habit now and you'll never have to build the habit later. You're already doing something new by creating this blog. So, if you can do some of these right things from the beginning, it's really helpful. I do have an episode on my podcast that's like the things I wish I would have done or wish I would have known from the beginning.
I saw that you just did that pretty recently,
right?
Yeah,
pretty recently. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure both of those are on there. WordPress and alt text, I'm pretty sure is on there.
That's awesome. I love that. That's such great advice. I mean, those are those little things that make that Yoast light turn green that just makes your heart so happy.
We love those little dopamine hits for sure.
I love that. Oh, that's so great. Well, Madison, thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom and knowledge. Can you just share how they can connect with you, those who might be interested in having you migrate, work on their blog, design for them, where they can find more resources as they're building? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my podcast is called The Vine Podcast. You can listen to Melody's episode a few weeks ago, depending on when this goes live. But that's my podcast. So that's a great place to just get some wisdom, get some little nuggets. We talk about design, WordPress, blogging, all the things over there. Our website is graceandvinestudios.com, and that's the best place to just go find all the things. We've got our podcast there. I have all of our services there. We work with bloggers on their branding. If you're looking to kind of establish that brand, we do semi-custom web design and we do full custom web design as well. But if you're not sure kind of what would be the best fit, you can always just reach out via email and we'll help point you in the right direction. And then as far as social, Instagram is definitely the place that I am the most often, even if it's not that often. So that is Grace and Vine over there as well.
That's awesome. So we'll have all of that information for you guys down in the show notes. But Madison, thank you for being here. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Pretty Focused podcast. We'll see you back here for the next one.